So I'm here in Chinatown, which I've been coming down to this area since its emergence in the 80s. I used to work down at Baja Beach Club. So it's been a long time. No, I wasn't a regular back then. But still. Anyways, so I want to point out this hotel, and it's nice they got a Starbucks here, but they should have Asian flair cups. Truly, in this Starbucks, they should have, it should say on the cup, Chinatown, Chicago. And here's the Jocelyn Hotel, but it should mention Chinatown, Chicago on the cup. Truly, they need to do that on the Starbucks cups. Like in general, they mention the area they're in. So, like you're in Buffalo Grove, it says, thank you, Buffalo Grove, or something like, great to be in Buffalo Grove. They can come up with different slogans for the different stores in that area. And each store, even in Buffalo Grove, say, can have its own little spin. Like here would be great to be in Chinatown, Chicago. And then they be like the Lunar New Year they can put on the cup. Like the year of whatever it is, Chinatown, Chicago. So those cups are just an expression of saying thank you and acknowledging the area. So Starbucks needs to start thinking local with a little bit of their branding. So on their packaging, so they can get that Wintrust feeling, that local feeling where you're a big organization, but they keep the name of the local bank. And so they want to get a more mom and pop feeling to Starbucks, where people don't get lost in that it's a huge corporation and they feel like it's part of the local community. And in turn, they can get involved. Like right next door is the Jocelyn Hotel, and Starbucks can do coffee and beverage services and everything for the hotel. And the thing is, the hotel's open 24 hours a day, and they do tea services and everything else. And so they can provide, now it's not sold in their retail, but they offer certain Chinese black teas and so on to the hotel. And so Starbucks works with the hotel and can customize their catering to the hotel to give a oriental feeling. So they would have special cups and everything. And it would have Starbucks on it, but it has the Jocelyn Hotel. It's co-branded and then has an Asian feeling to it. And so it can offer pastries and breakfast sandwiches. Starbucks can come in. I used to use Dunkin' Donuts at the Marriott Hotel. For Rotary was our weekly thing we had at the Courtyard. So every week we had Rotary. And Rotary, I forget, sponsors what charity. But anyways, the pastries and that came from the Dunkin' Donuts right down the street from us. And they would deliver based on what they wanted. So whatever pastries and that. And then we had coffee service. But the coffee service, I don't think was Dunkin' Donuts. It wasn't Dunkin' Donuts. We had our own coffee, and I don't think we purchased from Dunkin' Donuts. But the whole thing is, we did purchase our pastries. So we had muffins and donuts and all that. Their assortment come in, and I would lay out the spread. So I managed in the restaurant, supervisor, manager. It depended because we had a GM. So Susan was the restaurant manager. I was the supervisor. But when Susan wasn't there, I was the manager. So it depended. My title changed. But she was a good boss. She was female. and we got along perfectly. And I did the majority of the heavy lifting, actually, when I came there. And she liked it, and I took a lot of burden off of her. So, anyways, we used to use Dunkin' Donuts. And we use them for Rotary on every week. And if we had any others, our pastry orders went out to Dunkin' Donuts. And that was at the Courtyard. So the local Dunkin' Donuts had our Courtyard pastry business. So Starbucks can bring in their food and sandwiches and that. They have lunch plates. They have vegetable plates. And so all that can be offered. They don't do fine dining, but they can offer at functions that have more fine dining. So you bring in the Chinese and everything. Starbucks can provide the tea service, can provide the coffee service, and can still provide pastries like desserts and so on. So again, they can figure out how they can intertwine as a complement to existing Chinatown. So I don't know where the coffees and that come from around here, but Starbucks can have a catering or commercial side that's stuff that's not offered in their store. See, your commercial side doesn't need to mirror your in-store side. These businesses want certain things that are unique to them. And so on your commercial offering, you offer things that are not offered in the store. And it's good for you because it doesn't poach from your existing clientele. Your clientele goes in on the retail side for what you have. You're selling to them on the commercial side, making something more custom for them. And so they're unique and they have to market it and get their own clientele and sell it. And so your retail operation is doing what it's doing and they're doing what they're doing and you're helping them on the commercial side. And so it's a win. You're sometimes giving up a little to get a little, but it also sharpens you. Knife sharpens knife, sword sharpens sword, blade sharpens blade, so on, however you want to say it. That's why they have think tanks. They bring in these incredibly sharp minds, and they're together, and they help each other. Like Pascal, he used to write to another mathematician about his findings, and they would write back, and they would correspond back and forth. I told you about the Renaissance age, how even in the age of enlightenment, they call it, they didn't like each other. The traditionalists compared to the modernists, to the others, but they helped each other. So in one way, they were competing. In another way, they understood how that thought could help them with their traditional art. So as they were solving a problem for them or helping them, they were getting a new insight in how they can position their traditional art. So remember, the teacher learns more than the student. Truly, and that's why the teacher stays ahead. And so the student learns, but the teacher learns from the student. And so Socrates always stayed smarter than Plato. Plato stayed smarter than Aristotle. And Aristotle ended up not having a student. But the whole point is the teacher stays sharper than the student. So that's why teaching is a great way, and that's why older people like Warren Buffett, he should teach. And it would sharpen and understand trend and how they're bouncing back and how they're looking at things. So your students give you an ability to reflect and how they process information, how they see things, and so on. And it helps you become better at what you do. So your classes change, and with those classes, you get different perspectives. And so teaching can be incredibly fulfilling for yourself, enhancing yourself. As well as you enhance yourself, you enhance your students, and as you enhance your students, you enhance yourself. So it's a self-completing prophecy. And so what I was going to mention here, you got American Metro. You can't see the Metro. But Mark, one of my clients, he was a banker here. And then another one of my clients, he was a sales rep for American Metro. And him and Mark were both my clients. And then the CEO, who wasn't my client, but still liked him, he was the CEO. All three of them were white. They had Asian employees, but all three of them were white. And Raymond Lee was the owner of the bank. He's Asian. But they had three white people that were very important into the functioning of the bank. And so there was a great pairing between whites and Asians. And now these were all white males, but David used to do stuff with the bank, and he knew Raymond Lee. And David did bank consulting, and Mark was a good guy, and his daughter learned Japanese, I think. And we were trying to get his daughter a gig with my other client, David, who owned translating. But remember, in translating, there's research papers that need to be translated from Japanese to English or from English to Japanese. And so they're needed in a lot of documentary translations and so on. And even if the computer is doing it, they have to proof it. So they're still needed in many different ways. And what did David, his other partner, he wanted to hopefully one day that he could convert him to heterosexuality, convince him that he was on the wrong path. And David is Spanish. He's from Europe. And his partner is from Mexico. And his wife, a beautiful lady, and I think she's from Spain as well. But good people. And what I'm saying is that, he wanted to hopefully, and he prayed for his partner and everything else, and that one day he might see the light and change his path. But he hoped that he would get a traditional family and repent and change and come to Jesus. David, very spiritual. So David, not my partner, but my other David, my client, and they own the translation firm here in Chicago. But good people. And one thing that I learned from David is that he used to put a clause in that if the client changed anything, the scope of the project, they can adjust their fees. So if the client changed what was contractually laid out, amended it in any way that it was appropriate and the client agreed to it, that they could change the fee trust, because there's a cost for changing and amending the contractual agreement, because they have to do training or whatever it may be. And remember, I told you, the government with the contractors, and this is where they failed, in the aerospace industry, got the $50,000 or $25,000 toilet seat or whatever. The reason is the government kept on changing the scope of what they wanted from the project. But in the contract, they had a fixed fee. And all that adjustment cost the aerospace firm or the military contracting firm a fortune. And they didn't know how to pass it on, so what did they do? They started inflating costs, like they had, a $25,000 lunch or whatever. They were trying to figure out how they wouldn't be upside down in the contract. But the thing is, they didn't put in, if you change the scope, we have to adjust the costing appropriately for the change in scope. So you have to scrap one thing and you're adding another, or, whatever it may be, but he put it in all his contracts, a smart guy. And that's what they didn't do the military contractors is put this clause that will allow them to recalculate the cost so they didn't have to eat the losses of what was scrapped. So, anyways, this bank is a good association between whites and Asians. And they had Raymond Lee was the owner, and he runs he invests in basically the Chinatown Museum. And the owner, the founder, the female, her husband's a white male. He has a full beard and mustache. Good guy. And I sat with him many times for the Lucas Museum on the lakefront, and I was kind of upset at the Friends of the Park that they didn't work out the deal, because it would have been awesome for us to get the Lucas Museum and the Star Wars, and that means you get the Lucas Sound Studio that they do with pictures. And remember, Lucas Sound can also go into TVs and radios and into cars. And they haven't got into it, but it can go into automobiles. It can go into motorcycles, anywhere that has sound systems, RVs, buses, trains, airplanes, truly. But they have yet to touch on the full scope of their ability, and Dolby and others. But the whole point is that it showed a very good collaboration. They had only praise for Raymond, and Raymond's always done me right, so I respect him. And so he's been good to Chinatown, and I'm wondering where this is all going. He has a import-export business. His daughter lives in New York. His daughter's married to an individual who runs a hedge fund in New York. And so, again, I don't know where this is going, but I would like to see it advance. Become something more than it is. So, it's just unique, a part of Chicago, right? And you'd like to see it become better and advance and become more unique, and as the city rises, it rises, and so all boats need to rise, right? And so you have to figure out a way to work into the existing structure which made Chicago unique. Yes, like Pilsen area for the Latinos and so on. You have to figure out how you're going to move forward and have this unique ambiance of the city and keeping the heritage, but moving it into the modern age with culinary and everything else. I mean, look at what Rick Bayless does. Do you think Rick Bayless buys into other Latin restaurants in the Chicagoland area? He should. He should offer a teaching school for them. And truly, he should look at bringing up the community and educating the community and refining the community. And I have no problem with that. And so, as knife sharpens knife, and the other communities refine and get better, and you have this balance. And so you get this natural balance that comes. And there's Grant and others that are more in traditional American food. And so he sharpens that. And so you get this overall incredible culinary experience. I don't know who... I worked with some great Italian chefs at Tuscany's, and I met some from Stefani's and so on. And so there is a part of you that's competing, but there's also a part of you that you're part of a greater community, and you're working together to improve the greater community, but again, you're competing for your segment of it. So how much one grows or the other, that's a give and take, but there has to be, like they do in the insurance field, through the Department of Insurance and that, there's this standard ground that all these insurance companies, like banks do, they reinsure their industry. It's the same thing. They have this reinsurance, right? Insurance companies gobble up and they kind of reinsure each other. So, again, they have to figure out how they're going to move this forward and bring it up to something more vibrant and bring up, I don't understand, right down the street from this, and you have people coming in like from China and visiting. They can go to a NBA game now. And so at the United Center and that, because they have the NBA now in China. And so when they come into town in a function, and maybe you do the Chinese functions that come in, maybe it's for the late fall. Truly, you set it up for the late fall, and that way basketball season's coming on, and the Chicago Bulls do something when they come into town, enhancing that aspect of expanding and, seeing the American going to a game at the United Center, or they can go up here, see DePaul play at Wintrust Arena. And there's many collegiate institutions in China. And so they need to get diversified in their athletics. They're pretty prominent in the Olympics, China. And so, again, they need to diversify, and this is a way they can create more activity and keep their people healthy. So that's what sports originated from. If you don't understand, go back to the Aztecs. When they weren't warring, they played basketball. Do you know the Aztecs played basketball? Now, it's not in the way that we play basketball, like in Kansas, the farmer had the basket and they shot it up. They had holes in the wall, and they didn't dribble. They ran like football. And what did they use? Well, the same thing ISIS did for a soccer ball. They used a human head. And so you had to get across this arena with the human head, and then you had to jump up and stuff it in this hole in the wall. So there was one hole in one wall and another hole on the other side of the arena and another wall. And it was a floor, it was like a basketball court. And they had to take the head and they jumped up and stuffed it in the hole. And yes, it was brutal combat. So you had to fight through, it was animal ball. You had to fight through your enemy. And they used physical combat. And they fought each other physically, and they had to get the head into the hole to score a point. And I forget how many points there were. But it was to keep their military sharp. They keep their people healthy. And so sports, the Roman, the that was all to keep them incredibly sharp. And so they wanted fierce competition in sports to keep their people strong. And that's what Hitler was trying to do. And he did raise the physical stamina of their people. And that's what Arnold took over. He was the fitness czar. And so, again, raising the stamina, the ability of the people. So you have Wintrust Arena. And so here, and they can come down and catch a game at the collegiate level. So remember, when the conventions are coming in, And you can work with the teams, and the teams can work, like, they can work with the NCAA when they schedule games, but you also have the WNBA here at the Wintrust, because they don't govern a bigger arena, because they don't draw as much crowd. And so it's better they're in a smaller arena. So the whole point here is they come in and you can schedule the games out. They'll be in for a conference, and then usually a conference lasts, Monday through Friday. And Friday evening they tend to leave, or Friday afternoon they tend to leave. But some conferences you can schedule coming in on a Friday and are here just for Saturday and Sunday. So when one conference goes out, you can schedule a short conference, a weekend conference. And they haven't done this, but you have ones that come in on Friday. They have the reception and gathering on Friday evening at McCormick Center. And then the convention starts on Saturday, Sunday, and they leave Monday morning. They check out, and the new convention, the weekday convention, comes in Monday afternoon. And so you can plan this out correctly, and then you work with the sporting teams. No one does this in the country, but they work with the sporting teams to make sure they're in town when these conventions are. Like in Vegas, they're having the different sports teams. Okay, now they have the sports teams. Okay, let's say now you're integrated into the convention. Now, remember, they're going to be out of the casino and into the sporting event, but again, it creates, more sports book in that. So they lose in the casino, but people get interested in the sports book. But the thing is, you have a problem with Vegas. You got to make sure that no one's fixing anything. Because the problem is, when you get all the casinos right next to the sports, people tend to like to rig things. And so you don't want them rigging things. So you got to make sure that you get your good China walls and your ethics up. That's why they didn't offer, like UNLV. It was the NCAA always worried about UNLV and tampering. If you've ever read, there were a lot of things they worried about UNLV and throwing games. And they were worried about getting tampered by people trying to manipulate the sports book or sports outcome to make a lot of money in the sports book. So they read about it. I used to have the president of UNLV on my LinkedIn. But it was always a worry about UNLV and its sporting programs and making sure they didn't get influenced by the casinos, by somebody trying to fix events to make a lot of money in the sports book. But here's the marquee in that, and so they have it, and you just have to have, and those teams in Vegas, they got to stay out of the freaking casinos. Truly, they can go there to host events and everything, but they can't be betting. If anything in the off season, but you got to make sure they have no non-season. And I'm sorry, we had to report our transitions in their accounts, their compliance in the NBA and that in sports. They got to see all their holdings. They got to see their accounts. It's in HR and that. No one else knows in the league, but compliance, they got to see where your money's going. And so they got to stay abreast of that. And that's why in my business and finance, you got to disclose your outside business activities. They want to know who you're affiliating with and why you're affiliating with them. And they can deny affiliation. Take the CFA exam. They talk about an ethic component. That they have a right, the managing partner has a right to deny your outside business activity. And there's natural conflicts. They have to deny. And they can't approve because that's a violation of the charter altogether. But there are others they can approve, but they don't have to approve. It's at their discretion. So, again, you can integrate this. And here's White Castle. Now, there's an interesting mix here. So White Castle are mini burgers and everything else, and it's a taste of Americana. Now, you have the White Palace down here that has nothing to do with White Castle. So, both white, but one's White Palace, one's White Castle. So, it's distinctly different. But, again, it's in between. So, there's a lot of UIC students and everything that they can market into as well. Because UIC has housing here for medical students, and that lived over here. And so my friend Kumar and Kumar, who were accountants, they were bookkeepers and used to do for the residents, the medical residents at UIC, and I was trying to work with them, Chris and Chris. They were brothers, and they had an accounting firm, and one of them died. My friend Chris with a K. I think the other one was with a C. But anyways, their firm, two brothers, like mine would be Olson and Olson. So, or Olson cubed. If I brought my brother Carl, me, John, and Carl, it would be Olson cubed. And so it would be the three of us. And so it would be Olson cubed. And anyways, getting back to it, I was trying to work out things so I can work with medical residents and work with their financial planning. And so getting into residency programs and working with their financial planning. You can work with nurses. Rick Edelman, he's big with nurses, but he doesn't get into nursing schools. But he works with nurses. Rick Edelman has a lot of nurses. And so he does stuff with them. His main charity is the Boy Scout Girl Scouts. And his organization that he focuses on is nurses. But he doesn't get into nursing school. Why not? And nurses, remember, there's not only nurses for humans, there's veterinary nurses. And hygienics are nurses for dentists. They're dental nurses. Hygienist is a dental nurse, per se. And so there are dental nurses. They don't call them nurses and dentists. They call them assistants and other names, but they're still nurses. And so Edelman can get into that and then into their schools. So here, there's nothing here in Chinatown, right here. Like this train station has nothing to do with McCormick. There's an exit there and an exit over here. And one side, well, both sides exit into Chinatown, but one side exits into McCormick Place. And this is old Chinatown. So this is the original down here. The mall is newer. This is all the older Chinatown. And so it's a different look. And so it would be nice if they enhanced it and it showed modernization in that and represented the city. And here's the Chinese church. And so it would be nice. It showed modernization and people come in and they see it and they can see progress. That's one thing. The Nazis with the wheel, it was forward motion. BMW has the propeller. That propeller in the BMW, they took that kind of from the Nazi symbol. And again, the propeller is supposed to mean forward motion. So again, both BMW and Mercedes were around in World War II. And I think maybe Volkswagen. I don't know the whole story. I just know the story with the BMW propeller. And Mercedes, I think, did ovens for... But anyways, that's why they do certain reparations to Jewish people. So they made the ovens that incinerated the bodies. But they could have continued on doing that, working with people that wanted to be, like pets. They can be cremated pets. And then you cremate them, and then you can make it into a pet ring. Like in that ring, you know how they crush it and they make it into a stone, the ashes, to, immortalize them when they cremate them. Well, you can do that with the pet, and you can make it into a dog or whatever. Truly, like you could put inside of it an image of that dog. So you'd have to manipulate the stuff correctly, but that takes a lot of more science. But again, you can create it, and inside the ring, you can see when you look at it, the picture of your dog or your cat or your pet lizard or your goldfish. You want to cremate your goldfish. Now, I don't know if there's enough in the remains. You might have to add to it, but you can see the little goldfish inside the ring. And that's where the artificial diamonds come in, because they're clear. And so you would press that inside. You press that first, and then you create the artificial diamond around it, and you put that in, and then you press that around it. And so you can see the little fish inside the artificial diamond. So it's another way to do it, and you immortalize them. And you can wear it as a ring or a necklace or a bracelet. Surely, a charm bracelet or whatever, or a necklace, and so on. And it's another way. So Mercedes could have continued on making the ovens for crematoriums. And so they can convert it from lemons, evil, to lemonade, goodness. So down here, so you have all this, and I was going to go up, and right down the street is Illinois Institute of Technology. It's right up on State. But again, they need to plan out what's going on with the sporting team and the concerts and that with the conventions. And it's not only here, but the Donald A. Stevens and other things. They have a bunch of sporting teams up in Rosemont, and they have a convention center, and they have a convention center in Schaumburg, and they have the Boomers. And so they have to work together with the conventions and the sports teams and so on to plan things out. And so you have the Marriott Hill Springs right here, and it's nice, and they have the two, I think, dragons or the Chinese statues. But this is in Old Town. And so you have Pacific Global here, and that's where Betsy is the president. Or I don't know if she still is. And it's right here, Pacific Global. And so, again, there's several small Asian community banks. And so it's a good way to diversify your money. Even big banks like Chase, they can loan to Pacific Global. So Pacific Global needs a certain thing, bank syndicate. And so Pacific Global has a big, say, lender, and they need $100 million. Well, Chase might provide $90 million of it, and Pacific Global $10 million. And Chase gets the fee on the $90 million, and Pacific Global gets the fee on the $10 million, plus an origination fee. But the whole point is they compete separately, but they work together because they don't have the funds. And if they can bring the business to Chase, that's awesome. And then you have another bank in Chinatown Square. But the whole point is these larger banks can work with the smaller banks. And they might originate certain deals but they don't have the capital. Well, now they're able to get the deal, and they can loan their $10 million, and they get the $100 million they need. So they package it up, and my friend David Kudo can do this, or American Metro is another example. Maybe you get $10 million from Pacific Global, $10 million from American Metro, $10 million from Cathway. That's $30 million, and they get the other $70 million from Chase or Bank of America or Fifth Third. So they can break it up, and they do this. It reduces any bank's particular risk on any project. So again, it's a way that they compete, but they also work together. How do you think they do syndication of bonds? You have a head syndicator, and he's an originator, and then he gives it out to different syndicating organizations, different brokerage houses. So one brokerage house like Morgan Stanley will be the lead, and then they give it out to Merrill Lynch. Oh yeah, they give offering to Merrill Lynch and others, and sometimes Merrill Lynch is the lead. And the lead person makes the most money, and they all want to be the originator, but they're all not, but they get a piece of business in the secondary as being part of the distributor. So Merrill Lynch will offer a bond origination deal that Morgan Stanley was the lead underwriter in that, and then they brought in Merrill Lynch to further syndicate, and they bring in a certain amount of houses depending on how big the offering is. And so they compete to be the originator, but they also on the back end work together. So there is this dual yin and yang. So double-edged sword, yin and yang. So in one way they're competing, but in another way they work together in the secondary market. That's why you have your retail side, and on the other side, the commercial side, you're working together. So on the retail side, you're competing. On the commercial side, you're working together. So again, they're China walls and everything, like ADP. It worked with Chase, and it works with Fifth Third. No, I'm sorry, PNC. But the thing is, it has a China wall. It works with two banks, a regional bank, PNC, and a national and global bank, Chase. And it has a China wall, and it works with both organizations. And so it has its PwC team, and it has its Chase team. They can't hang out. They're not supposed to be interacting, not even socially. So they're separate teams, and truly, it's Morningstar here in Chicago. They know that. They have funds. They have their own funds, but they also gather information from all the other mutual funds. And so their own funds have to buy things from them, and their things, their funds have their own teams, and those teams have nothing to do with the other side of Morningstar. And they purchase information just like any other mutual fund from Morningstar. It's a totally separate entity, and they don't hang out together. It's a China wall. My girl, she was in my small group. That's why I say my girl. She's a cutie. She's Korean, and she did bookkeeping. She's an accountant who worked for Morningstar. Morningstar has teams of accountants. But anyways, they have certain things that they can't intermix. So they're not allowed to hang out outside. And you know this when you get jobs, so you don't get jobs where you can't hang out with a family member. Truly, you can't even socialize at Christmas. So you're not supposed to be taking those jobs. So you work for the organization where you can, not the organization you can't. Here's PNC right off of Chinatown. And they're right here, and I don't know if they do a lot with the police. So the police might have a Union Bank, but again, PNC can work with them and do certain offerings. So there's a lot of police officers here. So PNC's right here. I would have my bankers and talking to them. And I tried to take over PNC's wealth management. Do you know that? I made a pitch because I made a pitch before to take over another bank's wealth management. But I made a pitch to take over PNC's wealth management. Now, Michigan Financial, I was with and I brought in on it, and Gary, and he didn't handle it the way I would have handled it. But I did make a pitch to take over their financial service, their financial planning business, or to be a part of it. And how we did it at David Hubbard, and you don't understand, we worked with another bank, and I forget the name of the bank, but it had several branches. And what we did is we did the lower wealth management, and clients above $1 million, we had to pass up to theirs. So their private wealth management was clients of $1 million or more. We dealt with clients under. So if we had small clients, any under $1 million, and they grew to over $1 million, we got to keep them. But if somebody came in and had $1 million or above, we would initiate and then introduce them to the bank's, wealth management group. We were prohibited from taking them on as a client if they had $1 million of investable assets or greater, as an example. So we work with, it begins with an H. They had several branches. Anyways, but it was a dual wealth management. It wasn't efficient for them to run the lower half of their wealth management. They didn't have economies of scale. We had economies of scale through ING. Finnick, his broker-dealer, was ING, which is now something else, I forget. But we had the economies of scale. So we could do it at lower costing and make good margins. They couldn't. They're a smaller bank, and they couldn't get the scale to make it work. We could. So they could make it work $1 million above, brought enough profit for them. So, again, it's like I wanted to go in Pacific Global and offer wealth management. And I ran into a little issue with the one girl. She was a CFP, but anyways, I'm not going to go into that. We were going to do presentations on, but I wanted to bring in wealth management to them. We had scale, they didn't. And we could offer things at price points they couldn't. And so we could bring a whole portfolio of things that they couldn't. So it's the same thing with American Metro. We could add another group go into American Metro. They didn't have a wealth management. These are things that I was trying to get David into. I did all this way before when I was at GCG. I pitched a bank and to take over, to introduce and take over wealth management in a bank, Itasca Bank and Trust. So, anyways, I've been doing this, and then there was several others, but for a long time. And so, understanding the platform, sometimes you can offer here BMO Harris. So, opportunity may be on the lower scale because economies of scale work for them on the larger end. Or you can be a clearing firm for them. So you might not get that, but they need to clear trades. And Singapore has a broker-dealer, and they can have a commercial component to it where they work with financial institutions to clear trades. So they can be a clearinghouse, and they could offer Bank of Montreal, BMO Harris, the ability to clear trades through them to give them economies of scale that they don't have. And Singapore can aggregate with John Hancock Funds the clearing. It's just it's not separate, but you're aggregating together with John Hancock Mutual Funds to give you economies of scale. So Singapore can get better economies of scale. So there's things where these things can work together. So again, here, Chicago used to have a lot of cranes all over the place, and it meant good things were happening. In the stride for autism, bringing them a full life. And this is great because you get a beautiful view of Trump Tower right here. So down Wabash, but it doesn't go all the way down. Wabash becomes a one-way heading the other way. And you have Columbia College here, and you have the Hilton Hotel right here, South Michigan Avenue. And this used to be right here, used to be a Harold's Chicken. That's the first time I tried Harold's Chicken. In my first breakdown, in my free time, I used to go around restaurants and tasting product. Now, the thing is, Harold's didn't appeal to me. There's Buddy Guy's Legend, but it makes sense right next to it, a Harold's Chicken next to Buddy Guy's Legend. But why doesn't Harold's Chicken just offer their food service inside of Buddy Guy's Legend? I don't know what type of food service they have with inside Buddy Guy's, but Harold's Chicken could be offered with inside of Buddy Guy's. So it would have been better for him to do it inside of Buddy Guy's. But anyways, and right across from this hotel, you have the Merrill Redskin Theater. So I don't know what it plays. And then you have another hotel, which they redid. I've never been in. But, the Blackstone. And so there's BlackRock, which is a fund company. But then there's Blackstone, which is a real estate company. So this is the Blackstone Hotel. And then here down Michigan Avenue, you got the Congress Hotel and all this. So I truly don't know where they're going with this city. And there was a quest for this to be the number one city in the country at one time. This was a while ago when we were called the second city. And there was this strive to be number one and be the first city competing with New York. So at one time, you're part of the same country, but also you're competing. And Chicago wanted to be number one. They didn't want to be called the second city anymore. Now it's really the third city because Los Angeles is the second largest city and Houston is number 4 and soon to overtake Chicago. So I don't know where this city is going. So it doesn't seem like it has this zest to propel itself forward, and it wants to have the bums and crime to be its leading industry, where you have cops racing around and you have bums all over the place. And it seems like the tail is wagging the dog. And those cops, they buy property. They have mortgages, that they invest in houses and property. They also have portfolios they invest in their funds and everything. that invest in everything outside of law enforcement. So their job is integral in keeping the peace, because guess what? Explain that to a cop how it works. If they do things right and their systems are effective and they keep the city clean and, crime free and bum free and that, well, their portfolios will be a booming. Also, their lives will be a booming. Their family will enjoy the city. Truly, their family will be able to come down to the museums, to come down to the city, enjoy the beaches, enjoy everything. And so, if the cops do it the other way, they literally make their family's life miserable. That means their family, their friends, and their community which they live in, they make their lives miserable. So, if they're smart, they're moving towards, and that's why police don't need corruption. It tears down everything. And that's why the mayor's office and government officials don't understand. They're participating right in their investments. Whether it's in their own personal property or in their 401ks or their retirement accounts or their collectibles or whatever it may be, that's where they get their benefit, their economics. So they should be unbribable, because if they're doing the right thing, the things that they touch are turning to gold. And so if they keep the city clean and crime-free and moving correctly and all that, then everything booms for them. But if they allow it to go the other way, that's why the state of Illinois pension funds were all upside down, the teachers fund and everything else. And that's what teachers don't understand. If they don't create good students, they eventually destroy their own investments. So they don't understand how the financials work and how they're cutting off the nose to spite the face. So if they keep things clean and promising, things go incredibly well. And their portfolios go incredibly well. So their private placements with businesses around Chicago and that. We went in partnership, my family did, with a Chicago police officer. He turned out to be a crook. Sad to say. And who did we get involved in? With a Latino. And this Latino guy had really good skill in the body shop business. But the body shop business is all about renovating and modernizing and revitalizing cars and that. They don't need any accidents to make a lot of money. So they don't understand. They're a detailing shop and they can work with car washes. And their body shop people can work in car washes to enhance and take out dings and to restore paint and restore interiors and so on. And they can bring all that expertise to the detailing departments of car washes. So again, they don't need accidents at all. They're a restorative service. Like I'm looking at this van. They can restore and resurrect and modernize. So, again, if you understand how things work, you only get goodness. So all roads should lead to holiness or goodness. And it seems like the church doesn't understand its mission. Its mission is to turn everything holy, to get rid of all filth, all disgrace, all disgust. And they're supposed to be turning things holy. So, again, I don't understand what they're doing. they're literally killing themselves. They just don't know it. I explained this to Pete with insurance and everything. He's in insurance, but he doesn't understand certain aspects of insurance. And I show them how certain things were a self-destructing thing that people didn't understand how it worked and how it was destroying their community and in turn destabilizing the insurance companies. But again, Sophia, it has lots of beautiful colognes and perfumes. And this is chicken on the strip, saute. But again, Burrito Beach and many other things at property. You know, when real estate value goes up, they make money. You know, realtors, 90% of the realtors in the city of Chicago basically left the business in the 2008 downturn. They washed out. Why? Because real estate values dropped by, in some places, 90%, but 50% in others. And they went down, and you can't make commission. All of a sudden, they're making less money. You don't need a lot of appreciation, but you need stable housing markets. You don't need price depreciation. You need stable housing markets. A zero is a hero in that. You don't need deflation because commissions go down. So you want stable and rising housing markets, but not too much. Not too much because, again, you outpace people's ability to earn money. And that's what the Federal Reserve's supposed to be managing, pacing the economy correctly so it doesn't outstrip people's purchasing power. And the Federal Reserve really should be talking about purchasing power parity. So they're looking at the United States and what it can buy in these different areas, like Ellen Goldsby from the University of Chicago, who runs the Chicago Federal Reserve. He's supposed to be looking at the Midwest. Surely there's a Kansas City as well. But they're supposed to be looking at it and seeing that, making sure that inflation isn't stripping away the wages and employees are upside down. They're upside down in their purchasing power. Inflation is moving faster than their raises. And so the employees' raises are upside down. And that's what happened and why people were in the 2000s at 1980 wages. 1980 wages, and that's why Trump got elected. 1980 wages, but they were in the 2000 pricing. So they were living 20 years behind. They couldn't purchase things in year 2000. Their life actually deteriorated. Truly, because of the downturn, their life deteriorated. And so they were at incomes, and then markets slowly adjusted downward, and you had all this negativity. So they're supposed to be looking at purchasing power parity, making sure that it isn't outstripping wage growth. Wage growth is always right side up. So the employees are always moving towards a better life. But not too much low inflation, because then you get overheated markets. So they have to allow a certain amount of appreciation, and they do this by pulling certain strings in the economy, balancing things out. But again, things went upside down and the Fed wasn't doing its job. And neither was Congress. So the Fed does monetary, Congress does financial. But also Congress makes laws that affect monetary and financial. So in a way, Congress can work against the Fed, and that's what's happened. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and the right hand does something and the left hand cuts it off. And that's what's been happening. So before they disclose to the public, they have to have private meetings with Congress. And so Congress can see what's coming down in their financial, because they work with the IRS and Department of Treasury, which works with the Federal Reserve, but Department of Treasury works with the IRS. And they make these decisions in Congress, what tax things they're going to allow and what tax things they're going to change and so on. And they also offer these different economic incentives. And they do certain infrastructure and other projects. And so they have to be talking to the Federal Reserve and giving meetings from bodies of Congress and what they got on the table. And the Fed needs to know what they have on the table, both in the Senate and in the House. And the House and Senate need to know what the Fed has on the table. They work independently, but this way they don't sabotage each other. Because the way they do it, they stick a fork in each other, and it's constantly screwing, and we can't move forward. But then we have our state, right? We have state-chartered banks. And then there's private placements, and that's security, and then the State Department of Insurance and so on, that's regulated at the state level and so on. Well, the state Congress needs to know that, and then they have to report down to the counties, but the counties and local need to report what they're doing up to the state, and the state needs to funnel it down what they're doing in that county and how that is going to affect the local governments, how it's going to trickle down from the county to the local governments. And what the local governments is doing and how that's going to trickle up to the county and how the county's going to trickle up to the state. So what we have is incredibly imperfect communication. And so this system runs like it's chicken with its head cut off, which is a horrible image in one way. But the body goes one way and the head can't move, and the body's trying to search for the head. And they never pair up. And so that's what's been happening. And we have so much mismanagement, it's unbelievable. And we need to change that. And we need to get proper management. And this is why we have so many unbelievable problems. And we need to fix that. And so, again, the court systems and so on, it's all part of the management system. And you can't properly manage something. If you learn from Hank Greenberg, he sat down with all his heads of all the department once a week. And he did risk management. He didn't tell them exactly what to do. He wanted to know what they were doing. They needed to make their thing successful. But he needed to know to make decisions for AIG. He needed to know what each of them were doing so he could manage the risk between units. And so he meant and had, that's what Hank Greenberg was a genius at, risk management. And the swaps and everything, as they found out, AIG didn't have any of that systemic risk. Well, Hank Greenberg, Elliot Spitzer got him illegally fired. Elliot Spitzer was a con artist. But what did he do? He saw the government's, the people's hate of the financial institutions. And so the sentiment, the feeling. But objectivity, they shouldn't have been. But he used the subjectivity, their feelings, like the LGBT, they feel. And what are you doing? You're killing everybody. But objectivity, you get rid of the LGBTQ. It's like a no-brainer. But subject, well, then how many people are you going to let die and suffer? Truly, because you have a feeling. Well, I think about all those people in misery that are suffering incredibly and dying. But I guess they haven't been around a lot of people I have. I've seen children and adults. You go into hospitals, go into burn wards and see the pain, the suffering, and the misery. And then I worked in the homeless shelters and so on. And you start understanding, and you're like, I don't want to see them this way anymore. Get rid of the LGBTQ. It's a no-brainer. Because if you don't do it, that means you have no brains. So some things are just clear as day, like abortion. It should be gone. But a self-regulating organization where I got Jen involved in women's groups. And they set standards. And they regulate these, and so people do the appropriate things. So, again, there are certain things that need to go away. We can't keep on destroying the womb. It's not good for women. That incomplete cycle is very devastating to their body. So, they need to carry it to maturity. They could give it to an orphanage or foster, and I'm all for that. If that necessity. Truly. But they can't terminate the pregnancy. So once started, cannot be stopped. And that's what the Bible says. So once it's initiated, it cannot stop. But I keep on pointing out how devastating this is. And women have been destructive, and it's made, you think it's only women. You destroy the host, you destroy both the male and female. And so it trickles on down. And we have a lot of screwed up people, especially in the highest rates of the community, find in the Appalachian, where whether it's white, Hispanic, or black, find the populations that have the highest area of abortions. No matter the race, those areas of those people in the United States where they have the highest levels of abortion. And you'll see that the other children tend to be pretty screwed up. My mom never had abortion and never had a miscarriage. Sanctity of the womb. So again, you have to understand this and the devastation it creates, and you have to move in a certain direction. So again, there are certain things that are self-evident. I'm by St. Luke's Church of God in Christ. So here's another one, and I didn't catch the name, but those are both black churches. And here's another black church, St. Matthew's. It's a United Methodist church. 3 black churches. I used to live right here. This used to be the projects, and I lived in that first door right there. And we lived at 3 floors. There's a basement and a second floor. So there's a main floor, an upper floor, and a lower floor. 3 floors. But the project was full. I worked at Dave & Buster's. And the project was fully full. I didn't have any problems with black people. So, again, there are 3 churches on that street. You think those churches would have made, and there was 1 church right in the projects. 4 churches. That's the failing of the black church. They need to get their, that's why, yeah, they're different faiths, but they have to have an organization where they talk and communicate with each other. Because one under Christ, one body under Christ, there's 50,000 Christian religions, but it's under one person. One person. all 50,000. So all 50,000 different religions are under one person. So the Presbyterian, Lutheran, Independent, all those are under one person. So ultimately, there's just one, a monarchy. So it always goes back to one. So again, you have another Christian church right down here, and this was brought in before the projects came down. And you have all this area back here. This was all housing project. And you still have housing project, which some remnants of it. You had the high-rise buildings. They went early. The low-rises, they went a little bit later, but not all the low-rises. As I'll show you, still a significant segment of this area, and this is property tax value that's going to waste. So they have a new building coming up here, which is nice, a couple of them. But you have down here, the city is not generating revenue with housing vouchers. It's losing revenue. And not only does it not collect property tax on any of these, none. So it loses all the property tax, and then it pays for the rent, maintenance, and support of all these structures. And then it not only pays for all that, it pays for the sewage, the water, the electricity, so much of it maintaining into these structures. There is so much outflow that it's incredible that the city is losing money, and this is why the cities bleed money, like New York and that. It is unbelievable how much money they bleed. And I'm talking bleeding. Hundreds of millions of dollars annually, if not more. This is a sinkhole. And so, how do you do this? Like Good Times. What did the family? Both parents worked. And it was right here in this project. But these were the low rises, the last remaining. And in turn, what is this going to be? And these people can be part of the renovation. So, again, they can be part of the cure or the solution, or stay part of the disease and they have to go. But they can modernize. It can stay all low rises. But they can modernize all these. It looks like they might have somewhat, but they can rehab all of these and modernize them. They're nice brick structures, so they can leave them the same way and just modernize all the structures. Renovate them and modernize them. But it has to go to a rent-to-own thing where they have to start paying property tax. So they have to figure out the job training and so on, and how you're going to do it, and a phase-in. So you have them at a certain place, you do evaluations and survey everybody where they are, what they make, and so on. And then you figure out what services you can offer to them to get them from where they are to where they need to be, so you can phase out the subsidy. So the subsidy should go away, and they should eventually be self-supporting. So look at the difference on the other side. They have a lot of upside. And if you do a zero net lease, a triple net, it's like owning the property, but they lease it from the city, but they have rights to sublease it, to rent it to somebody else. So they never physically own it, but they get a life estate. And so that life estate is still owned by the city, the property, but it acts as like it was sold. But you don't ever own the property, but you get the upside appreciation and everything. So it's a mixed situation where the property owner still gets appreciation on the land and that. But the structure and all that, that's to the people that have it. They own the structure. The property owner still owns the land. So when they make a payment, they're paying for the land, not the structure. Eventually they can own the structure free and clear, but they still have to pay the property. That's called property tax. So it works that way. So they still have to pay a fee to the landowner. And then the landowner pays the property tax on that portion. They pay the property tax on the house. So the property tax is divided into two segments, one for the structure, one for the land. And the landowner pays property tax on the land, and the house owner pays property tax on the house. So they still have to pay for the whole structure. They have to pay the landowner too. But the landowner, like when I pay rent, I pay it to my landlord. He pays the property tax. I don't pay the property tax. That's not my worry. My worry is to pay the rent. And so I'm paying a fee to the landowner. So you pay that fee. But you own the dwelling, and you can sell the dwelling, you can demolish the dwelling, you can redevelop the dwelling, as long as you don't do environmental contamination to the land, because that would destroy the landowner's portion. But these things work. And so they have a lot of upside potential. They're right across the street. It's only in their best interest to get motivated. And what happens? The property value around here on the other side, they get a bump. They get a bump. And those people are making more money, and so the diner and all these other businesses have better clientele. So the knock-on effect is all positive. So I'm going to go down, and you got the new casino opening. And this used to be Montgomery Ward's right here. So where the Echo is up here, and then the building across the street, this was Montgomery Ward's office building, the tall vertical building right here. This was the office building right here, Montgomery Ward's, which you don't hear about, but that was Chicago very own, and he started Friends of the Park, and he invested all his things to make the lakefront great with Marshall Field and some others. And his warehouse was this building. Office building right there, warehouse right here. His warehouse was right next to his office building for Montgomery Ward. So this building right here was the warehouse. That tall building was the office building. So Montgomery Ward's was big when I was a little kid. We had Sears, Montgomery Ward's, and many other. And Chicago was a retail dominant. So we have this going in, and I'm really looking to see what they end up, if this does truly be magnificent the way they say it's going to be. And I'm wondering what they're going to do with the building across the street and all of this. Where is it going? And so you have another church right up here, and it has the big cross at the top, which is beautiful. And it should glow in the sunlight, if done right, if polished right. When the sun hits it, it shines and it has a halo effect on it. And it glows bright. And so, again, if they've done that cross right, but it should unbelievably shine in the sunlight. And it can be with paint that can store energy and then shine at night as well. Yeah, glow in the dark, but you can do it with gold paint. So it's infusing energy absorbing with energy radiating. One aspect radiates, another aspect absorbs. So depending on the amount of light, it shines a little bit more or less during the day, but it also stores energy to re-radiate at night. So that's what it's nice about mixing nanoparticles. Certain to reflect, others to absorb. So you get the beautiful radiance in the day, but also you get the beautiful radiance at night without any power. And so the cross shines day or night. It's a beacon of holiness, right? So anyways, I'm going to cut this video, but these neighborhoods should substantially benefit. So I really want to see cute girl on scooter. So I really want to see, I'm going to go up Milwaukee Avenue. So intersection, Elston dead ends into Milwaukee. And a lot of people take Elston here, they come down Milwaukee Avenue from where? The financial markets. So to avoid the highway, they go from Wacker Drive over to Milwaukee Avenue, take Milwaukee Avenue down to Elston, take Elston straight down to get out of the city or to move to the north side of the city. Some live on the north side, some live further out, but they take Elston all the way down. They don't take the highway. So it gets lots of traffic when the exchanges start letting out at 2, 3 o'clock. Surely some people are in earlier. There are different offices that close and then they finally close. But they start coming down Wacker to Milwaukee. They take Milwaukee. I forget what crossover street from Wacker into Milwaukee. But they take it to Elston all the way down. Some continue straight down Milwaukee. Yeah. But they all come from the financial district. And this way they fan out north and west. This is northwest. So this is going west-north, really. More west than north. And the other Elston is going north, more true north, but it's still going a little bit west-north, but it's more northwest. Elston is more northwest. It goes more north than west. Milwaukee goes more west than north. And so you can take Milwaukee almost up to my house. It goes all the way up. Milwaukee actually heads to Milwaukee, Wisconsin.